Okay, Danny, I just made a list of the poems we did for this week. Say one that baffles you or one that you just, we haven't talked about or are not likely to talk about, but you really think we should. Hey, Danny.
Wow, this is a tremendous
How are you?
responsibility. I'm well. How are you, Al?
Good.
Yeah.
Is there any intrigues you or frustrates you or you want to hear Gabe say something about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk about incident, I guess.
You want to talk about incident?
Yeah, I think we didn't really get to that. I think we're doing that tomorrow in class.
We're going to do that in our own class tomorrow, but this is a webcast, and it's a really important poem.
Yeah.
Emily, what would you say right off the bat? You've thought about this poem a lot, I'm sure. We'll give Gabe a second to think about what his thoughts are.
Yeah, incident, when we talk about that poem, we talk about the way it kind of decomposes, deconstructs a style of authoritative language that Baraka is suggesting is oppressive or implicated in kinds of oppression.
What's an example of an authoritative style or language that we read or hear in the United States that deserves being taken apart?
In Baraka's case, it would be that kind of newsy writing, which presumes to a level of kind of journalistic authority and omniscience.
Omniscient journalistic authority, and it's combined with, is there another rhetoric or language or vocabulary in it, Anna? You've got a phone call, but yeah, is there another rhetoric?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was focusing
That's
on
right.
the phone call.
Lily, is there another rhetoric, another vocabulary that might be criticized here? Who's the we in We Know Nothing?
The cops?
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
police
yeah.
rhetoric.
I kind of conflate those two things.
Yeah. Like crime reporter
Right.
/ so it's almost
Police
like
report or like like an internal police report and
Right.
also like an interview that a policeman would give to a crime reporter.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got like police press conference where in maybe the opinion of a lot of people in this room, but not of everyone, that we see a collapse of those two, so that the we know nothing speaks seemingly for both those vocabularies. Okay, so Gabe, would you say something, and then I'm going to ask Amaris if she wanted to add something about Baraka's incident.
Sure. If we're not focusing on anything too specific yet, one thing that I find interesting about this poem that I feel like we haven't talked about yet in our time together is
Wait, say that again.
is the that we haven't talked about in our time together is
that's
the
sincere sentimental.
Sure, yeah. The thing I was going to say is the comma work. So most of the lines are divided by upwards of 3, 4, 5, 6 commas in some cases to create these very long and expansive sentences, but also these very rolling, measured and almost like rhythmic sentences that are. It's hard to say what their effect is. I think they're hypnotic. I think that they are disturbing in the sense that there's so many different adjectives piling up on whatever this case might be. Yeah. But they also add to this idea that, like, they add to the irony of that line, we know nothing, where it's like, actually, we know, like, easily, like, 50 clauses of things just from these lines that you've told us. And then at the end, it's like, oh, we know nothing. Other than all of that, we know nothing.
We know nothing. And in between, other than that, and a whole lot of other stuff,
yeah.
we know nothing. So there's a bitter irony. There are two, thank you, Gabe. Let's go to Amaris in a second, but there are two things that all the comma separators are doing there. One is creating that kind of stumbling, Steinian, there's a whole lot going on. It's really brilliant. I mean, it's just as good as any Stein in its comma separations and the slowing and the kind of stumbling down the staircase, in a way. There is a stumbling down the staircase, so there really is a kind of modernism with a lot at stake, I guess. And then the second thing about commas I would suggest, and I'm not going to say anything more than to suggest it for anyone else, but if anybody's interested in Lawrence Ferlinghetti and the way the early Ferlinghetti, who's pretty good, the late Ferlinghetti I find to be fairly mediocre, sorry. And it's actually late now because he's still around in his late 90s.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, sorry, Larry. But the early Ferlinghetti uses this building up the comma, this rhythm. The rhythm at the end of this poem, though he's post-beat, is so Ferlinghetti. I just want to suggest that if you go out there, you'll find that. Let's go to Amaris for another thought on incident, and we'll go to the phone.
Yeah, I just really enjoy how the sound of the poem really puts us in the
as a witness, as a spectator to this horrible violence. It's very raw, the way he describes the incident of the firing, that staccato kind of halting rhythm we were just talking about with the periods and created with the commas. And then it comes to actually this really creepy sort of calm at the end with that really nice long line, the cool surprise and the fixture of his hands and fingers, moment of death when we leave the victim on the pavement. And I think just the sound of it is really, really powerful.
Thank you so much. Can I just quickly, pardon me to the person on the phone. I'm just going to take 30 more seconds. Jason, would you randomly give the microphone to one of the students? Ha 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 ha. Lo.
Hi, Al.
Hey, Lo. I'm going to ask you a general question because I know we're going to talk about this again tomorrow, but there's something fundamental here. What? There's something fundamental here in this poem, which is, I think we all presume when there's a crime committed that we would like clarity, that we would like it all untangled and disentangled and agency made clear. Because if you want to prosecute somebody, it would be nice to know who's the agent of violence and who's the victim of it. And yet Baraka's brilliance, we all say when we talk about this poem, is keeping it unclear. It's the maintaining the unclarity. So how do we square those two things? Because in life, I think in the world of prosecutorial action where crime doesn't pay, you kind of want clarity, but the poetry we study in this course is all about doing what Baraka does here, which is to make sure we never really understand much because that's the state of things. Any thought about that problem? I mean, I imagine that you grow up thinking clarity is a good thing.
Well, I'd say just how you kind of mentioned about journalism there. If you were to take a workshop on journalism or something, the first thing you kind of learn is that inverted pyramid, the who, what.
Can you bring the mic a little closer to you? Yeah.
Like the first thing you learn is like that inverted pyramid, like what, when, why it happened. So I think why this poem really intrigued me was that we didn't really get those answers, but we got this kind of sense of like incoherence around them, like how it happened. We didn't find out how, but we found out a bunch of details that sort of attributed to how. So I think that's what intrigued me.
Nice answer, Lo. Snaps for Lo, for serious. I'm open this to anybody. I have a feeling Lily wants to say something about this. Can journalism actually do Baraka's project? Not as a poem, but as journalism. Can journalism convey the lack of clarity in a crime like this, and should it?
Well, I think like as a direct answer to your question, we would have to like rethink what the goal of journalism is. Like, you know, I feel like now with my reading about certain like political issues or big current events, I'll do like two different types of reading. Like I'll read an AP bulletin looking for like just facts or whatever, and then I'll read other news outlets or like journalists I really like who will give more context or whatever. But I think like ultimately Baraka encourages us by not making things clear to not rely on our heuristics, like what we would apply to this story. Like we might create a narrative or put these people into a box that they don't actually belong to, and in that way like trivialize what's happening to them. Yes. As in like, can you report on crime and create empathy for both agents, like the person to whom violence is done and the violent person?
Yes. Really well said. Final thought on this. Baraka is very clear about not being clear about identity, racial, more generally socioeconomic. You get the sense that he knows the scene, but he does not want to give you, and nor does McKay, by the way, does not want to give you those kinds of identifiers. And journalists are taught that's almost the first thing you do, partly because they want to aid the police, and the police are always telling you this sort of basic description. So it's kind of like there's a kind of anti-profiling tendency here in the poem to try to keep a reader from doing any kind of profiling. Like, is this black, so-called black-on-black crime? That's the question Baraka got most about this poem.
Yeah, he also hints pictures of the dead man are everywhere, kind of as to say, like, if you want that information, you can find it elsewhere, because
right.
you could pick up, like, the New York Post, put a big picture of his face.
And you
or
will get
whatever,
the identifiers that
Yeah.
you mostly look for, and they're typically racial identifiers. Okay.